and brothers, I'm Johnny. I invite you to join me on this journey of the awakened masculine. Realize your potential and remember who you are. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about identity loss. But before we get into that, I want to ask you a question. When did you last truly feel like yourself? I don't mean any of the roles that you perform, husband, father, boyfriend. I'm not talking about roles, I'm talking about the real you, the real man inside who has ambitions, dreams, desires. Because for a lot of men, that is something that they might have lost along the way. Holding down a job, building a career, starting a family, all these roles that we play throughout our lives, they can often bury the real person that is inside. The reason I've come to this place today, this place is very significant to me. This old oak tree, it's a bit of a beast. I often come here when I'm feeling troubled. And 11 years ago, I came here and I sat in this exact spot. This was shortly after my near-death experience from sepsis. I came to a realization that I could no longer continue my work as a musician, as a music producer. I couldn't support my family on what I was earning. Sitting in a dark studio all day in front of a computer was not doing my health any good. So I had this profound realization that I could no longer pursue that identity anymore. I had literally built my whole life around that identity of being a musician and a music producer. That was my dream. That's all I'd ever wanted to do. I was quite literally living my dream of working full-time as a musician, as a music producer. The thought of not being able to do that anymore and not being that person, it felt like a betrayal. It felt like I was betraying myself. It literally felt like I was ripping my soul out of my body. And I know that sounds very dramatic, but that is what it felt like. I came and sat in this spot by this tree and I cried my heart out for what felt like several hours. That was rock bottom for me. I felt like I'd kind of lost everything. I hadn't lost everything, but because I was so strongly identified with that career as a musician, the thought of leaving that behind was just too much for me. I actually went through a period of grief while I mourned the loss of that life. The other thing that is significant about this tree is that it also signifies a new part of my life. That was becoming a tree surgeon. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to film the rest of the episode up this tree. So I'll see you up there. Right, so I'm at the top of this tree now. This thing's got to be 200 years old, maybe more than that. It's an absolute beast. So I've taken my helmet off just because it's really hot. But as you can see, I'm well roped in here. I'm not going anywhere. I've got myself a nice perch up in this beautiful old oak tree. As you can see, the sun's just coming up over the hill. We're going to talk about identity loss now. You might be wondering how identity loss happens to a man. And there's various ways this can happen. We all get very invested in our various roles: boyfriend, partner, husband, father. We get invested in our careers, whatever that may be. For me, it was musician, now tree surgeon. But these roles are not really us. They're just things that we do, usually to get something. Obviously, we work to get money. But many men perform their role as a husband, boyfriend, or partner in an intimate relationship in much the same transactional way. Now, I've talked about covert contracts in previous episodes, but it's such an important thing that I want to just mention it again now, because a covert contract is another way that a man can easily lose himself in the midst of an intense, intimate relationship. These covert contracts are contracts that the man has created in his own mind that involve something like this. Something like, I will cook the dinner tonight, I'll clean the house, and in exchange, you will give me your approval, or you'll like me more, or you'll want to have sex with me. What happens is we end up performing all these duties in the hope that we're going to get something back from our partners. When that something we want doesn't come, we become more resentful to our partner. She, meanwhile, has no idea that we're setting up these covert contracts in our minds. All she sees is the man that she used to desire and be attracted to, slowly losing himself in some vain hope that what he's doing, and the more he does of it, the more he'll get from her in terms of approval, love, intimacy, sex. And the thing with covert contracts is they never work. While you're conducting yourself in this way, you're slowly losing more of yourself. You're also losing your partner's respect, because she can feel that what you're doing is transactional. Like you're trying to get something out of her in exchange for what you're doing. This is never going to work. To her, this is very unattractive. This ends up being a self-reinforcing cycle of collapse, because the more the man performs these duties, the less he becomes of himself, the less attractive he becomes to his partner. It's very easy to see how these covert contracts come about. Modern life has a lot of pressure, trying to hold down jobs, pay mortgages, pay off debts, manage a household, raise kids. There's a lot of pressure there. These things build up over time until we get to the point where we've given away so much of ourselves supporting our family and our relationships that there's really very little left over of our true selves. And this way of relating to women via these covert contracts, this is something that most of us have been taught from a very young age, because most of us come from generations of men who have been raised by women. Our fathers have been either emotionally or physically absent. We have been raised by mostly female teachers in schools. If we've even been lucky enough to have a female parent around, a mother, she has taught us to seek women's approval. Now there is a whole generation of men who are intent on seeking women's approval. When I gave up music and I retrained to become a tree surgeon, that wasn't actually the answer to my problems. This was just an external change. Inside, I still didn't really know who I was. Possibly the process of retraining to do tree surgery helped me along the way, but it was only a very small part of what I really needed to do. The question of my identity hadn't really been answered because I just had a new set of responsibilities. That man was now being buried under physical exhaustion. So most men build their entire identity around these roles that they perform through their work or through their relationships. But when you really strip that back, there's nothing left. There's no true sense of self. The question is, how can we truly lead our partners and come to our full potential if we don't know who we are underneath all the roles that we perform? So a man who has no real self to bring to a relationship can't bring real presence, love, or leadership. How can we get out of this situation where we've given everything away of ourselves and we've completely lost our sense of self? For me, it was a very gradual shift. It took time. One of the most important things that I had to do was a complete reframe. I was doing all these things for my wife, for my kids. This was just a simple reframe of the concept. So now, when I do things for my wife and my kids, I do it because I love them and because I want to help them. I want them to thrive, have good lives, the best lives that I can give them. And that is on me. I'm not doing it to get anything from anyone. I'm doing it because I want to help them, because I love them. This reframe did actually change my life because it removed all of the covert contracts behind what I was doing. My wife could sense that I was no longer doing things to get something from her. And this is a really critical step. And it will have a profound effect on your relationship when you can truly embody that concept that you're doing things for yourself, for your own empowerment, and you're not doing things on a transactional basis to get something from someone else. How do you find your way back to yourself? It's not a quick process. It's a slow, gradual process. It doesn't come from doing something new, adding something to yourself or your life. It's more a process of taking away. By removing these roles and these numbing practices from our lives, we can gain more clarity about who we really are. I had been medicating myself for years with alcohol, weed, porn, cocaine. Once I slowly began to stop doing all of those things, I was more able to see what was left of myself. That can be very difficult to really sit with what's underneath all of that numbing, and that is where the gold lies, because once we've done that, we can really gain some clarity about who we really are. And by removing those substances, those medications, we can get a lot more clarity in our minds, and we can see things a lot more clearly. If you can replace those numbing practices with embodiment practices, things that bring us back into the body, so I'm talking about breath work, meditation, physical activity, all of these things bring us closer to who we really are and enable us to answer these questions with much more clarity. And by performing these embodiment practices, cold water exposure, breath work, hard physical activity, they bring us closer to that sacred connection with ourselves. So rather than numbing out our feelings, we're actually getting closer to our feelings. And then we can gain more clarity on what is actually important to us and what we really want. So having a sharp clear mind is one of the most important things in order to do this work effectively and to be the most effective leaders for our families. It becomes much easier to really find out what our true values are. I didn't find myself by looking outward. I found myself by really looking inward and removing all of the other stuff and sitting with what was left. I just want to leave you something. When I say realize your potential, I don't mean that you need to be more productive or do more stuff. I mean it in the more literal sense, as in make real, bring into being that man that you truly are underneath all of those other practices and performances that you've been running throughout your life. Sit with what's left behind and begin to find out who you really are. In the next episode, I'm going to talk about another reframe, and that is taking 100% responsibility for our lives. But until then, keep doing the work, brothers. Keep showing up. Realize your potential and remember who you are. Okay, so now it's time to climb back down. Okay, I'm ready to make my descent. I'll see you at the bottom.